Sorry, we're just talking about the future. I have some business ideas. Um,
All right, what's up, people? Welcome back to another episode of What the Future. Today we have a really awesome and spicy topic for you guys. We're going to talk about drugs, kids. Not necessarily the ones you're thinking about, maybe a little bit, but also what drugs can mean, what that definition entails in general, how we should look at the broader scope, I think, of what could be considered of a drug, benefits and side effects, as well as maybe that where maybe it'll take us in the near future, future developments of drugs. So this will be a fun episode where we get to dive into a little bit of some past history of drugs, as well as what they kind of look like today, and maybe how those can evolve into maybe different treatments in the future, maybe different futuristic designer drugs. I constantly think of like these elements from like video games or like Star Wars, and they have all these like synthetic chemicals and drugs people are like taking, and maybe where that could take us in the future as well, what that underground culture might look like, as well as some of the future medical advancements, things like nanotech or being able to take a pill that goes in and blasts away cancer or certain disease, or that maybe even can enhance our intelligence at some point, make us much smarter than we are today, kind of like in Limitless. Um, there's a lot of endless possibilities to where pharmaceutical drug industry could, I think, evolve in the future. So we're gonna kind of explore some of those ins and outs today. Anything you want to add to that intro, Sam, on drugs?
well, I mean, there's two ways of there are a lot of ways of thinking about it. I was thinking more in terms of like illicit narcotics
Hmm.
and pharmaceuticals and everything in between, because you know, the creation of the pharmaceutical industry in general, and actually pharmacies or apothecaries, is also a fairly recent thing. I forget the year, but again, it was sort of industrial revolution ish timing, where I think it was like a trade association or one of these things of like the Institute of Pharmacists that started lobbying for pharmaceutical drugs, or basically regulating what was considered legal or illegal. And we've had a bunch of similar things. So, yeah, I mean, I think the more fun angle is illegal narcotics. But really, again, I think the lines blur here between how we define a drug.
Hmm.
I was trying to define it for myself as a challenge, again, more in sort of the use of drugs, not like medicine, because those are two different terms with different connotations. And I asked myself the question, just writing down notes before I got on here, of like, why do people do drugs? Or, take some sort of substance or potion if we're talking about like ancient
Hmm.
times, all these tinctures. And I had three framing concepts. There are a lot more, but to keep it simple, was either to enhance, to escape, or to explore. Of course, there are way more reasons or motivations why a person might want to do that, but it seemed like that was a good way to start the conversation, or characterize like what's the basic impulse of why someone might want to, augment their experience, their kind of pure
Hmm.
experience with some sort of chemical. And then how will they achieve that? And of course, there are a number of approaches, whether that's through chemicals or other yet to be designed experiences, both organic or synthetic. So, framing concepts.
Hmm. Yeah, I think my first approach with this was when I was in college, because I was going down a pre-med track, and one of the
Mm.
courses I had to go through was pharmacology. And in pharmacology, it was one of the first things we talked about. And I went into it thinking, oh, a drug's a drug. It could be Advil, it could be cocaine, but it's much more nuanced than that. It's not as clear cut as most people would think, and a lot of that has to do with the conception or idea of what a drug is. And if you think about it, a drug is anything that really has an effect on your ability to perceive or take in sensory input from the world. anything that has an effect on the body, anything that may alter the state of the body itself. And when you look at it from that lens, that could be many, many things. That could be caffeine, it could be nicotine, it could be chocolate, it could be cocaine. The extremes that it goes to are the ones I think most people are familiar with, but it can be many, many different things. And I think when we think about it in a broader scope, it opens up the possibility of what we can talk about. Because obviously, if you go and drink a cup of coffee, it's going to wire you up. If you go and take some nicotine, it's probably going to mellow you out. You smoke some marijuana, it could have different effects depending on which strain you have. You take an Advil, it has a specific effect on specific receptors in the body that alleviate pain. While others might have, very bad side effects that might actually cause some type of physical pain, or that might cause some mental obscurity or hallucination, such as eating a mushroom or taking some LSD. So the variety of where drugs can kind of go can be quite wide. And it's fun to think of it in that way, because then it opens up the possibility for what drugs can actually do. If it's something that can affect the body in any real negative or positive way, then, we could talk about drugs in all kinds of different senses.
I think, again, what's tough for me with this around, I was just mainly speculating of what types of things in the future people would be wanting to, again, enhance or escape or explore. In the case of, let's say, psychedelics, it's almost like the categories or classes of drugs when you're saying like, enhance this, or maybe that's like a stimulant or something, escape something that's like more of a deliriant or depressant, or these classes, and then explore to me felt more like psychedelics. And again, I'm just creating random categories for no reason other than what might be a framework to think about what could come and why would people be doing this. But it's also important to think about, again, locations and cultures and use of language. Like you're joking, bringing up cocaine a lot. It's funny, right? Because in the US,
I live in Colombia.
I know,
I cannot.
this is what I was going to say, right? It's like something, coca, the plant, is right in many cultures, whether you're in Colombia or Peru or, where it's grown. Culturally, a stimulant used, I spent a lot of time in Peru and got to Cusco. You're at like 11,000 feet altitude. Coca tea is quite common. Something, you're drinking every day. You're not drinking cocaine. It's like tea, very mild stimulant qualities, like a green tea. But then when it's processed right and turned into cocaine and kind of goes into this different class, depending on the country and the classification of that's a problem. I forget the years, all of this data around like even that specific trade. And I think we had talked about it, and I posted sometimes about like Coca-Cola, which
A lot of jokes
interesting.
about Coca-Cola down here.
Okay, so
It tastes
Coca-Cola,
better too.
well, Coca-Cola, right, originally, still does have the extract of coca for flavoring. And is it not the number one importer of coca leaves into the United States? I did this whole
I'm
rabbit
not
hole.
sure, so I don't want to
They're in New
certify
Jersey.
that or not.
Yeah,
but I can tell you for sure, the plant itself is classified different than the drug.
Right.
There's nothing illegal about the plant here in Colombia, at least as far as I'm aware. Like I can go out and I could get a coca tea, and they'll put a coca leaf
This
in
is
my
not
tea.
coca tea. This is
I don't think it is. I hope not.
on live.
And many of our viewers probably will be familiar with the fact that Coca-Cola used to use the coca plants as part of their secret ingredients in their Coca-Cola back in the early days of the 1900s. And that to an extent, they actually still do. They don't use like the full profile of the coca plant, but they now have companies outside the US that extract the cocaine and they simplify it into like this liquid puree syrup that then goes into the Coca-Cola. Just a little fun fact there. They still kind of use it. They can't get rid of your secret ingredient. But I swear
It's
here
they
in
call
Colombia,
it
tastes better.
artificial. They call it natural flavoring, and how it moves. Yeah, I mean, again, it's. I remember also I didn't go so far down this rabbit hole, but it was also like the story of cannabis or marijuana, right? And when that happened as well, the Stamp Act maybe in the U.S. or things that were related to taxation of it. But again, regardless of, thinking about, illicit drug in the trade, right? Like the massive economies that form around both legal or illegal drugs, it's clear that there is demand for the augmentation of human experience. And so again, the reason we came up with this topic, just to provide some context, we were chatting after we recorded our last episode, and we were kind of went on a bit of a conversation or tangent, just exploring some of the topics we had addressed in the Super Babies conversation, which related to gene editing or gene augmentation or even hormonal augmentation. And, we were essentially talking about abuse of hormones, which is something I did not really know so much about. Brandon knew more in terms of like the sports world, whether we've heard examples of doping, but also, again, people abusing testosterone and how damaging really that can be for the body long term. So again, this is an example of a naturally occurring substance in the body that can be abused, at which point does it become a drug, right? We hear steroids. And so this was really kind of the basis of this episode. I don't know if you want to start there.
It's a weird kind of gray area. Like steroids are, still something that the body produces. There's a lot of these hormones that are put into our systems, especially in like the sporting world and whatnot, and for performance, and have been long lived throughout the bodybuilding world as well. And it's one of those things where if your body's not creating it and you're inserting it into your body, it is functioning much like a drug because it has the same effect. Again, it comes back to the definition of what makes a drug a drug. Like if you take HGH growth hormone and you're an athlete and you're trying to heal faster so that you can compete at a professional level, for whatever reason, that growth hormone can be produced naturally in the body, but because you're providing extra doses to your body is going to see that as a foreign substance, and it's going to react very specifically to that. That's why it has a profound effect. And so you could look at prescribed or non-prescribed injections of human growth hormone as a drug in that sense, because you take more of it, it amplifies certain systems in the body, your metabolism, your ability to heal, cellular reparation, repairing. I don't know the word for it. And then at the same time, when your body becomes used to that hormone, or I guess in this sense, drug, because you're providing more to your body than your body is used to, your body can go through withdrawal, just like it can go through withdrawal if you get addicted to a certain drug or a certain substance, because it's all achieving the same type of effect. It's either enhancing the body in a certain way, or it's depleting the body in a certain way. It's having some kind of physiological effect on your system. So even a hormone could be looked at as a drug, even though it's not specifically, cooked up in a lab necessarily. Even though most of them are strains upon strains because they want the next legal version of it or the next undetectable version of it so that they can use it. Happens every year in the sports world. But again, it's another way of looking at drugs. Anything that has an effect on the body, whether it's adverse or performative.
So I'm going to be provocative, I guess. A little. I don't know. The question that comes up for me is, again, we were talking a lot about augmentation of the body and whether, doing that before you're even born. Mm-hmm. you know, we can see ourselves in a point in the future where perhaps we've like done some gene editing or augmentation of a embryo that then is born needing some sort of supplementary medication to survive. Does that become like a drug addict at that point? Or similarly, are we seeing that now with certain trends? You know, I think of the trends with transgender individuals, right? Which is a very provocative topic, especially, you know, with the debate around gender affirming care. And in the United States, right, like kind of pulling back some of that support. And the question I have is, you know, you have this massive population all of a sudden of people receiving this, what's called medication or care, but you know, to excess can be drugs, can be something that becomes not only addictive, but your body becomes physically dependent because you've shifted it in a direction where it now needs that chemical to survive. So I wonder if we're have the risk of creating an entire generation that is, you know, it's as big of a scandal or problem as a kind of opioid epidemic. You know, if the access is cut off from the hormones, are we already starting to see a black market of hormone access? Are people leaving the country to get them? Are they going to start creating, again, gray markets for this? Do we have testosterone cartels? Right? Could that be the next big problem? How big of a problem, I don't know. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, so like specifically in like sex changes, they'll give individuals these agonists called GnRH, gonadotropin releasing hormones, specifically so that they affect certain parts of the body. So if you're a male, it would affect your testicles. If you're a woman, it would affect your ovaries. They have other ways to go about it as well. But like if you wanted to transition from a man to a woman, you definitely don't want to have a lot of testosterone in your body. Or if you're a woman, you want to cut down on the estrogen and uptick on testosterone. And it allows for those masculine or feminine features to proliferate and come into effect, and also helps the individual feel like they're, you know, going through that process. Now that's from a physiological side. There's an entire like aesthetic side to it that I just don't want to get into because I'm not necessarily in agreement with it.
We're talking about drugs. That's okay.
Yeah.
Addiction to surgery. I mean, I guess that's not really drugs, but
I think there is an addiction to surgery, and it's not even just for like sex changes and stuff. That's for everyone's, you know, a choice to do if they want to go down that route. But this happens in plastic surgery too. It doesn't have to be for a sex change. Some people want to have a smaller nose, or they want larger breasts, or they want to do their butts, or they want to transplant hair because they look terrible and have an awful hairline. Some people want to get all these things done too. So there's, you know, different ways to augment the body. Some are through hormonals, some are through blockers. In some ways, they're just like Botox is a perfect example. It's a drug that you introduce. It's a toxin, but functions like a drug. You inject it into your face and helps alleviate wrinkles, tightens up the skin. There you go.
it could cause botulism. Yeah, I mean,
It's very prevalent in society today. And I think it's because, and this ties into our last episode talking about designer babies, that our future children have an advantage that we don't have in this, that we can design them to potentially be more physiologically and mentally sound than we are today. So maybe they don't need to rely on those things. Maybe that baby can grow up and have the perfect face and body and things, and also be immune to a lot of diseases and disabilities and things that maybe we struggle with on a day-to-day ourselves. But for people that are alive today, you know, we don't really have the option to, you know, be reborn again. I don't know, maybe that'll happen at some point in the future. But, you know, if we're looking at our current lifeline and we're going to live 80 to 100 years potentially, if we're healthy, that's where drugs come in. People looking for ways to augment the body today. And so that's why it's so popular. People want to do surgeries. People are looking for that limitless pill that makes you super intelligent, that miracle drug that'll cure anything. And I think that's why there's such a big push for it, because as far as we know, we live once and everyone wants to do things, now, today.
Okay, let's play a game. I just
Play a game.
thought of this game where there's three. Well, I don't. Yeah, let's imagine there's three approaches. You can again escape. What was the other one? Enhance, escape, and explore is the game, and we have to think of what the future drug is for a certain context. So you're just talking about like you're a baby. You're born into a future world where you don't age, so you look like perfect prime human forever. You have 240 IQ.
Oh, wow.
I'm just gonna make it off the
I'm
chart.
going to breeze through every test.
I know I was trying to you're beyond comprehension. No, well, I mean something within the realm of possibility. But okay, so you don't age. You're look like Greek god, super smart. You've had an enhancement so that you can live in the atmosphere of, no, let's not go that far. Anyways, let's just start with the thing. You're physical well-being is that such that you live to 500 and you're super smart and you look great. What would be the types of drugs we could imagine that people like that would, what would they be trying to enhance at that point? What would they be trying to escape in their circumstance?
If they were this perfect little demigod.
If you're a demigod and you're so smart, right? Oh my God, your brain does not start. You're have solved every mystery of the universe. I think escapism would be a big one. And then, what are you exploring at that point? And what do those drugs look like? They're not psychedelics. It's that level? What are we doing?
So I'm going to bring this back to cocaine for just a second.
Oh, okay.
Because it's a good example. When people take cocaine, one of the biggest side effects that people experience is a feeling of euphoria, but also a feeling that they're invincible. It's called the Superman effect, where they feel like they can do anything. They have a dulled sense of pain. They feel a higher sense of reactivity. They feel more confident, more emboldened. And so that's why people that will take a drug like that do a lot of stupid things and go pretty crazy, because they feel like they can take on the world. I would imagine if you're this perfect little demigod, you're probably going to feel the same. You're going to feel like you could take on the whole world. You're not going to, it's going to be like One Punch Man. You have no competition. There's no one that equates to you. You're going to probably want some kind of escape, or you're going to want some deep exploration. Because at that point, everything that humanly ties you to Earth and humanity is going to really separate you from that feeling, I think. So you're either going to want to mentally kind of get away, which is, where you maybe can get into the psychedelic part of it, or even just, I guess, opening up the mind. It doesn't even have to be a crazy experience, but, finding ways to open your mind up to the universe, or even wanting to, get out there and explore the universe itself more deeply from a physical standpoint. I don't see any reason why you'd want to enhance any further. There's nothing to enhance.
Yeah, interesting. So the classes of drugs, or again, and when I was thinking through this, thinking ahead, I suppose it was not thinking directly as consuming something, right? Potions, tinctures, plants, even beyond synthetic compounds, but things that also a greater awareness of, the release of certain neurochemicals and things just from other experiences. You've seen a lot of examples, even with some forms of breath work, releasing more DMT in the brain, or experiences in sensory deprivation. Or I've seen a number of apps recently that I've tested, right? I test everything as the anthropologist in me, that, are basically strobe lights in quite a psychedelic way, but the frequency of the light and the patterns of the light, and it's using just the camera on the back of the flashlight in the phone. You like put it in your eye. It probably damages so much, but I figured why not? But does kind of put you into hypnotic trance-like state, which is quite concerning for, I'm like, what else are they putting in through this app? But, thinking of drugs actually fully kind of moving into things that do involve technology and not necessarily, again, pills or things that we need to ship around, but it could be like a secret pattern of light that comes through the flashlight on the phone that somehow can trigger some sort of transcendent experience. So that could be an exploration. Or will people get addicted to this stuff, right? And I would imagine in this future demigod person who is probably, seeking escape or exploration, like this persona we've created. Again, like where does escape, which is kind of a big class of drugs, manifest in sort of a detrimental way? Are they addicted to, full body haptic porn? Like, are they, is that something? Probably.
That sounds intense.
I don't know. I was like writing crazy stuff. I was like, drugs. What are the drugs? And where do we, again, not to be like, where do we need to think about the risk, but it's more like from a futuristic perspective, everything emerges out of these ideas. So we could imagine entire economies that form around something like that, and then illicit economies that form around that, and regulations and policy and cultural movements, all the things. Like, what is it? Is there going to be a massive movement of people who are addicted to strobe lights in their eyes?
It's interesting that you bring up light because most people don't know this, but inside certain parts of your brain exist photoreceptors. Photoreceptors are special neurons that take in light, and then when they take in light, they create a stimulus. Just like a neuron would in the brain normally, except these ones are really tailored to the receptive nature of receiving light, which are generally in your eye, but it's fascinating that they're inside the brain. And one of the worst studies we used to do when I was in college, and I really, really hated these, is we'd take mice and they would put these little light electrodes inside the mouse's brain, because inside of a mouse's brain, they also have photoreceptors, and they would turn the light on in certain parts of the brain, and it would cause the mouse to elicit a certain behavior. Then they turn the light off and the mouse would stop the behavior. So for example, you could turn on the light and you don't even have to condition the mouse. It's like having a remote control. You can turn the light on inside the mouse's brain, and within a second, all of a sudden the mouse is experiencing fear. And it's terrifying to watch. And you can push the button and then now the mouse goes back to normal. Like what the heck just happened? You can push a button to make the mouse hungry, and the mouse just keeps eating and eating, and it would eat until it would, engorge itself to death. And then you can push a button and it turns it off. And you can do that for multiple different parts of the brain to create to stimulate certain behaviors to actually take place. And so I find the idea of light very fascinating, because there's light everywhere. There's a light in front of my face right now. There's a blue light coming from my computer. We stare at our phones all the time, taking in light. What effect does that have on our mind, on our brain as well? There's a lot of studies being done on it. There's so many different wavelengths of light, and our brains operate on frequencies and wavelengths as well. So there's a lot of interesting stuff being done on that, just as there's correlation with audio and music. So light obviously is not a drug, but receiving certain doses of light can create certain effects in the brain that are representative of a drug in a lot of ways, in terms of how they create some of those effects. So I do think light is very fascinating in terms of those kind of effects that it has. So I am glad that you brought that part up, because I do think that could be very interesting in the future for people to look at, aside from like actual pills.
I mean, the question, and again, when I think about trade or economies, whether we're talking above board or shadow economies, right? And how do you even regulate things like that in the future? Will we be able to? In the same way the internet, right? Information flow, it's not something where it's like you wrote this down and some person needs to carry some like stone tablet or a written book to someone else and there you can intercept that. In the same way, if we're talking about pharmaceuticals or illicit drugs, right, that are regulated by entities or controlled or patented, and others cannot kind of compete or develop things there, or we're talking about natural drugs, or in some cultures considered medicines in the culture, but drugs in another culture, depending on legality, you're still dealing with global supply chains that consist of physical product. And if science, and technologies are getting to a point where we can elicit those same responses or chemical responses in the brain, like the same impact, but without needing to grow the coca, process it, turn it into cocaine, smuggle it places. It's as simple as sending light, a pattern of light from cell phone to cell phone. And I'm just using this as an example. I think it's less like the effects of cocaine, though in theory, you could probably create something that targets that receptor. Again, this particular product, and I'm not going to name them because I don't think their design was to be like, let's use this to create like drug-like hallucinatory states. It's more, something that someone had recommended to me that was deep into like the meditation community in Silicon Valley, but a technologist, also a psychonaut, like sort of experienced in psychedelics. And so, I would say that experience for me as someone who is well versed in those types of explorations of the mind, it was eerily fast and effective of something that I actually had to stop it right away because I was like, whoa, this is a little too powerful for just being a flashlight. I'm obviously oversimplifying it, but again, that makes me think like, what does a future trade look like where access to certain things like feelings, experiences becomes democratized, perhaps accessible. Oh, light therapy. But
throw this up. There's a Harvard study on it, but there's a lot more studies being done on light therapy and how it can help alleviate or even cure certain things like depression, for example. So a lot of those can be seasonal problems. A lot of them can stimulate from your environment. Some of them, again, are just, environmental stimulus. If you get the right amount of light in the brain, it can help produce more dopamine. It can make you feel more happy. It can really change your entire outlook, depending on how you want to look at depression and how it comes up with someone. So I think it's very interesting. In terms of like the whole like pharmaceutical side of the industry, it's something that's going to get challenged at some point. I mean, we're going to find ways like light therapy, for example, that would replace a lot of drugs that make these pharmaceutical companies a lot of money. And not to say that any of these drugs are good or bad. That's something that everyone else can debate on their own. But it will be challenged at some point, and it'll be an interesting crossroads here in society to see where we kind of take that stuff, because light therapy probably will not make as much money as taking a pill or getting prescribed.
No, I mean, it's, if we're going into the discussion of pharmaceuticals and particularly mental health, medications, which the percentages of people in the United States that are on some sort of mental health psychiatric medication is higher than many, many countries. And when you're talking about serotonin or dopamine, which, everyone at this point is kind of hijacked into a dopamine loop due to a number of things.
65% of people in the U.S. are medicated.
Oh my God. Sorry, but it's just
65.
I'm not here to be like, it's so simple. It's light, it's water, it's get outside, because I understand that these chemical imbalances in the brain are very real, right? And we were just talking offline about even just the brain-gut connection and imbalances that can happen that throw off things in the brain. And, the answers are not always so simple. It sometimes involves longer periods of time than just a quick pill or something. But yeah, it is amazing, light therapy, whether that's, outside in natural light or something that I've spent, I spent a lot of time in saunas. And when I came back to the United States, because I was in like straight up like Temescal sweat lodge, like natural situation, then the more like urban jungle of New York City is not conducive to that. So I've been in a lot of infrared saunas, but they have red light therapy as well in it because of the light therapy. And it's, the different lights or frequencies have different benefits, whether circulation or, again, mental health or things. And you can, at least for me, I feel an incredible difference, not just of my body cleansing through sweating and things, but the light. And, I've always been very sensitive to fluorescent lighting. That's just my personality. I will walk into like a grocery store or something, which I don't do anymore, but just like a commercial store with all that fluorescent lighting and like dissociate. It's like for me that obvious. And so I like a I just like warm incandescent lighting or even red lighting.
I do too.
Yeah.
Have you ever walked into like have you gone through like Chinatown and gone into like a Chinese grocery store and they have like all the white fluorescent lighting?
I would probably be lost instantly. Yeah, but
I know they have like a different like purview on how they look at light in their culture, and I totally get that. But like for me, and maybe you can relate, when you walk in to a certain environment that's lighted in a certain way, it makes you feel kind of weird. Like when I walk into one of those, like all the lights in my house have to be like a warm hue of light. And I'm crazy about it because when they're too bright, it makes me feel sick. Like
I literally live by candlelight. Like people have not really, but again, when I've been more off grid in places like in a jungle, which has no wall or basically roof, like a mosquito net, literally like a red lamp, and I'm like fine with a candle.
Low light. I'm a low light person.
This right now, the light in here, it's like it's a lot for me to try to light myself. But
everyone used to joke when I was at home in college, like everyone, that I was like a vampire because they'd walk into a room and everything would be completely pitch dark except for one little light, so I could see a book or I'd be on a phone or there'd be a tiny lamp in the corner and they'd be like, "Turn a light on. What are you doing?" I'm like, I felt more comfortable, like less stimulus. I can think, there's no distraction. I think that's kind of part of it too. Like all the light is a lot of stimulus and that's a lot for the mind, certain hours of the day. And obviously you need light, but I think there's also something to getting too much light stimulus that's probably bad for the body. It also throws off your circadian rhythm. And I think your ability to really think certain hours of the day, because your mind can only process it such a high output for so long. I don't know. I think there's a lot more to that because I definitely feel it. I don't know why, but
think about the length of human history and evolution and how small of an amount of time it has been that we've had electricity or indoor lighting past dark, even at this time. Like, I literally wear sunglasses in my house everywhere. That's why there's pictures. I'm always in sunglasses. It's not because I'm trying to look cool. It's like my eyes they burn with some of these types of lighting. I thought it was like a weird neurodivergent thing or something, like that I was like, sensitive to everything. But truly, my brother is like this too, one of them, where we joke around about like getting lost in retail stores or grocery stores or shopping malls because they are. I talk a little bit about this. It was my favorite chapter to write in my book on perception, of just how some of these things have been intentionally designed to create those responses. And I think people now are waking up more and more, getting closer to, inner awareness or connection that, hey, yeah, maybe these fluorescent, like these lights don't make me feel good, or going to an office in a cubicle where like that's in your eye all day long. I feel so different now that I'm at home. They're having these thoughts, and again, I wouldn't advocate for going back in time. Like, let's go back. Everyone needs a candle and we're using wax as opposed to, but I do think we have the ability with technology now to build systems that probably can adapt to your personalized needs in light frequencies that are best for you, and certainly healing ones. But again, I think that there's not really a commercial incentive to create environments, unfortunately, that are like healing and better for you, because then you're not triggering that anxiety that then you can sell pills for. So,
Yeah.
I've given a lot of speeches for healthcare companies, pharmaceuticals. So I'm, if anyone sees this and they're in that industry, this is like no shade towards that industry. It's more just they've got to adapt. And there's plenty, I think, of business and opportunities in these areas as well, thinking ahead beyond staying trapped in a framework that's like, let's continue to protect and patent and try to own chemical compositions, right? Like formulations, which I think more it's patent, like the genetic, the things that AI might unlock, but what happens when that's accessible to everyone? But yeah, maybe there are new business models.
Yeah, so I think that's a good question maybe for us to ponder is how do these companies evolve? Obviously, the pharmaceutical companies are the ones that really dictate the drug industry, the legal side of the drug industry anyways, and the illegal side, the illicit street side of it, we could also discuss. But just from like the legal drugs, the ones we take every day, the ones that 65% of Americans are apparently on, how does that business model change in the future? Do they just adapt and have a better suite of drugs that are more effective and that are also healthier with less adverse side effects? You don't see 30 different tiny words on the screen every time you see a drug commercial. Is it a different way to treat people instead of the typical allopathic, let's just give you this pill and take it every day for 30 days? Maybe there's some type of nanobot you take at some point that maybe goes in and has a similar effect to a drug that maybe can be programmed to keep you healthy. Maybe AGI at some point helps design one-time drugs that maybe are adaptable to everyone in particular. There's a lot of talk about creating drugs that are adaptable to your specific genetic makeup so that they're more effective and have less side effects, because a lot of drugs we take, especially the over-the-counter ones, are very, very generic, and they say, this is good for most people, except for people that have this, and this. And unfortunately, that's a lot of people out there, even if it is 1%, 2%, 3% of people. And they're just these blanket drugs that, cover the general issue, but, are not safe or healthy for everyone to take, especially if, some people are more sensitive to a certain variety or, whatnot. The side effects can be very, very bad, in some cases very deadly. So there's a really big push with AI to potentially create these drugs. Like, imagine taking an Advil, but an Advil that's curated directly for Sam so that you don't have any side effects and that it's more effective. Maybe you only have to take it one time. I feel like there's different pathways for where the drug industry can go from a legal side that is actually pretty exciting, because I think it would be a better alternative than the current one, because I don't think it's good to have so many people medicated all the time. I think that definitely creates a lot of issues and can be healthy. So I guess the key is, how do they stay profitable while also making us healthier, which has contradicted itself for a long time, but there's got to be an in-between.
Yeah, I don't think the business model of needing to keep kind of recurring customers, recurring subscription, whatever industry we're talking about, is really something that will persist in the future. I think when it comes to personalized interventions, which I'm very passionate about, and I think it will start in the supplements and food industries because they're less regulated, at least as of right now, than pharmaceuticals. And we don't know what's going to happen from the regulatory landscape in pharmaceuticals, but like traditionally supplements are kind of a free-for-all space. And we are like seeing already people in the biohacking communities or other communities that are doing just that, right? At least starting with creating the data, which would be used to train these algorithms or AI agents that would have enough. Basically, it's like large scale self-created clinical trials with supplements where people are saying, here's my stack, and they're recording the results. If enough people continue to share those results, I'm sure we'll get closer to even just personalized guidance or combination of supplement stacks. And then, if you choose as a consumer to share your genetic data, which I believe you should own that. That's not like 23andMe selling that off to develop this stuff as they've done, but more like you are a consumer. Like I possess my genetic data. I have, the massive CSV file. If I choose to explore, what might I want to do?
Create another Sam?
No. I'm just like, let's say it's like, in the winter I'm vitamin D deficient, quite tired. I want to supplement with that, but it's having other effects, right? Like kind of like receive some information there. But it turns out you have a marker. I do have this, actually. I could share it. I didn't know this, but my brother's super into genetics and studied this and was like looking at all of our stuff. And there's like a mutation, COMT or something. I don't know if you've heard of this, but it basically impacts your processing of folate. You need to take methylated folate as opposed to other forms. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff I can't describe accurately. The point is, I would have never really known. It's not something that, I would think about. But the forms, most of the forms, let's say, of folate in a multivitamin would not be that form. And it also impacts things like your magnesium, ability to like retain that or actually use it. So it's better if I supplement with that, right? Or foods where I can get it. And most people are deficient in magnesium anyway. Now, this makes me feel a lot better. Physically in my body and probably in terms of in the winter, I would say mentally. It's not something I really would have thought about. Probably wouldn't have escalated to like needing some sort of medication. But these types of things, when you think of this number of people on these drugs and the hormonal changes, I've been talking to a lot of women, let's say like postpartum depression, that no one really talks about it, but it happens to a lot of people with these changes. I think this kind of information could be very empowering. Now, when it moves into pharmaceuticals with like truly like personalized medicine, as recently Larry Ellison of Oracle, gave this presentation with Project Stargate about the promise for mRNA vaccines for cancer. And that had a very mixed response from people. And I think they're a little bit scarred from the past experience, I guess fears around the mRNA vaccines, which overall was like a pretty big feat of science and regulatory advancement, right? To be able to get something to market as quickly as these companies were able to do, regardless of, there were things that have happened, but this would have been like a 10-year process or longer, never made it to market. So when you think of like deregulation, there's some good things where we're actually able to start to even get to the possibility of what you're discussing. Will things happen? Likely. Is it a person's right to make a choice if they want to explore these types of treatments or not? I believe so. And I do think it's really cool, this promise of even not just personalized to you, but personalized to at least like a popularized subset, which I don't think we can even do because that data has not been available and not shared. Right? Like, this is treating this plus people with this mutation. And therefore, these people in this group will now not get this terrible side effect. I think that's remarkable, right? Because right now, we don't even know. It's kind of trial and error. With physical, drugs for physical ailments that also impact other, the full body system. But particularly the mental health and psychiatric drugs. Like this is something that is a staggering number. and something I think that we need to working on a personalized level, but also kind of holistic level as well, that involves food system supplementation and behavioral changes.
Yeah. This is incredible technology. And I think the real issue is not in that we don't have the technology or that it's not going in the right direction, but that people don't understand it and there's no education to keep people up to date. Like most people live a daily life. They don't have time to think about this stuff, research this stuff. They just want to have a degree of confidence that it's not going to kill them or hurt them. And unfortunately, especially with events over the last few years and with C-19 and whatnot, these things proliferated so lightning fast. People are just like, wait, you can do this, you can do that. I should take this. I have to take that. And then it's like all this peer pressure to do it. And it's like all of a sudden there's this big pushback. I don't feel comfortable. I don't want to take this. Why are you trying to jab me? And that's the problem. It's not that, and I understand when you push something so fast, there are, bad side effects and things that can happen, and it can lead to a lot of problematic issues, but it doesn't mean that the scientific advancement on it is bad, or the technology is bad, or that mRNA vaccines are bad. But there's a bad stimulus right now, stigma right now around it, simply because of how that stuff came to be. And so I really do think that there needs to be a little bit more of a re-education with people on what that actually means. Because when you talk about editing and copying and putting things in your DNA, it freaks people out. It freaks me out too when you think about it. And then who has that power? Who's making that decision? Do you have to do that? Is every vaccine going to be like that and you don't even know it? Have you taken one of those already? It's scary to people. And part of, I think, these companies moving forward, and Pfizer did a commercial during the Super Bowl the other day about how they have like 8 different ways they're trying to come up with a cancer solution by like 2030 or something like that. And it's great, but there's this super fast push to do things, and people don't understand what really goes into that. And I don't think they understand the studies, and these things are supposed to take 10 plus years for a reason. There's a reason there's such a long process for a drug to come out, for a vaccine to get approved, generally, for safety reasons. And that over time has given people confidence to believe in these things, so that 65% of Americans are medicated because they believe in it, because they believe in that process. And now I think there's this cultural pushback. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest hurdles in order to move forward and have some of these advancements. Because if we're going to talk about taking a drug that alters your brain and makes you super smart, so you have a 240 IQ, or you're going to take a drug that has little tiny robots in it that's going to kill all the cancer in your body, it raises a lot of questions for people. So I do think there's an educational component that is really badly missing, because the tech is like entering this parabola as we kind of get towards the singularity, especially with AI. And now that quantum computing seems to be like something that is legitimate now, and they just did I think it was at MIT, like they had this huge breakthrough in terms of like quantum computing chips being able to communicate with each other. Yeah. And that's going to make like quantum computing like an actual legitimate thing now. And it's not going to have this, this breakdown of the quantum bits. That's a whole different episode that maybe we could get to at some point. But bottom line is AI is legit. AGI is legit. Quantum computing is legit. It's going to happen at some point. And we're going to have these medical breakthroughs, and tech and science is going to move faster than it already is moving today. And so how do people mentally keep up with that and feel confident and safe that they should be doing these things? And then should government, should big pharma be stepping in saying, hey, you need to do this or you need to do that? And should there be a push for it? We're entering that phase, I think, in society now, and it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if a populace, right, historically is like not on board, it's gently or forcibly nudge them with some sort of crisis. I think what people were, what created this paranoia, right? Because it is contextualized now, these advancements with something like global lockdowns, global pandemic, like any new approach or treatment, of course, there are adverse side effects that happened or have been reported or we're getting more information on, which is a given. I think, as long as something is accessible and remains a choice, and people have autonomy over their decisions of what to do, provided there's not some sort of like catastrophic zombie apocalypse on a level where like, everyone needs
Big
to
fear of
buy.
mine.
Yeah, but let's say that it is a group of people who has, I have a cousin with a genetic condition, cystic fibrosis. I might have mentioned this in a previous episode. It is something that I remember taking a molecular biology class, like a genetics class, when I was in high school. And so high school level, nothing super fancy, but it was very kind of like high level. And we had to solve the problem of actually curing that disease on one of our final exams. And of course, it was like personal to me. And I was a little frustrated. And I was like, it's so obvious. Create a vector with this particular, gene edited thing which a vector would be, right? Like a mRNA vaccine. That's why you would call it a vaccine. And some people think that that's just a bunch of crap. So for a regulatory repositioning, but really, anyways, right, a high school student, Sam, and my 20 other students are solving this thing. And, I remember after that, I said to the teacher, why can't we do this? Why could I do this on this piece of paper in theory, right? And actually, you're telling us in practice this exists even then. And, there was a whole kind of ethical discussion there and regulatory discussion. But imagine her, right? She's not supposed to live past teen years, in a context where her lungs basically feel like they're filling with water and mucus all day long, and needs to use like vests to vibrate it out, take tons of medications, and be hospitalized from time to time, on the verge of death anytime that she gets sick. Right? It's no good. It's not great to live with, and she's still thriving. Well into her 30s, which God bless her, right, on that, but. Someone who's living like that, she's like a beautiful, vibrant energy. So I don't want to say she's like suffering or anything, but I'm sure if presented with someone living like that, right, knowing that they're going to die and given this death sentence, I'm sure she would choose that. Also knowing that there could be risks. So I think there was a group of people, whether we're talking about cancers or genetic conditions, that would gladly be on the forefront of this, and that's going to give them a second chance at life. Now, the question is, do we, in the future, with that particular illness, will we have enough testing? We talked in the last episode about super babies. Well, I know for sure now, part of the genetic test, if you are to do that, to people that are about to make a baby, however they choose to conceive, can do a genetic test and can see we're both not carriers, great, that won't happen. Or to people who can still choose to do something or not create that child, which is a debate, a kind of like religious or ethical debate. But, you might get to a point where we're actually able, let's say with that embryo, instead of discarding it, perhaps we could like do that gene editing there and fix the potential cystic fibrosis or any other example of the thousands or even more of genetic conditions. That's a massive opportunity for these companies, right? I'm not saying you're like, you can fix these things here or there. Again, they're different business models, so they're not like necessarily making money off of all of the procedures and devices and medicine, but that would be an example where I could see this creating some success stories, where people, again, we're able to kind of move past some of the early narratives that were attached to such negative stigma.
Absolutely. We have a comment from someone in the audience, from Juan Carlos, that whatever the future of drugs holds, it should be for the benefit of society.
The next one is good.
The next one, the so-called war on drugs has only created violence and corruption. These are some good topics I think we should touch on too. Maybe we can go back to the first one because I think this kind of dives into this idea of social inequality, maybe when it comes to drugs at some point. One fear people have is, that you lock out a certain group of society, either for socioeconomic reasons or for, you know, whatever bias they may have, or one country to another. If you have these miracle drugs or you have this ability to cure something like, let's say, cancer, for example, should that be something that's only for the ultra wealthy, something that's incredibly exclusive? Or should it be something that's open to everyone and everyone should have access to immediately at a very low cost? And obviously, these kinds of things are much more complicated for economic reasons, but it is a really good point. Like, if you have the ability to eliminate something that's been killing people for years, I think 1 in 4 people in the US die from cancer. Shouldn't that be made available to everybody?
Yes, and whether it is or not, because again, we have these business models or financial models that in the past might have worked based on intellectual property and gatekeeping. And I'm not saying this from any particular, like, my personal belief system of what should or shouldn't be. I'm just, like, from what I see in terms of the current moment of breakdown of certain structures, particularly intellectual property, the cornerstone of most businesses, in the face of AI, in the face of quantum computing, that all of a sudden can kind of like crack that and not only be feeding off of it, but democratizing or at least increasing access to all of this. It's almost like everyone on every level of society, whatever industry we're talking about, needs to rethink how to exist in a world or build businesses in a world where those concepts might not exist anymore. And this is, again, not some sort of like philosophical or political disposition or something. It's just sort of an inevitability that I believe will happen. So I think whether people try or not, might say like, yeah, let's make some money off of this. So it will be really expensive and we're going to gatekeep it and no one can access the secret sauce or our secret, concoction. I think it'll get out. We're at a point where whether it gets out or not, people will have access to extremely powerful tools to design this themselves. Even if that's gate kept, right? If the AI is gate kept or what it is able to share with people, I think there is a point that it gets beyond that, whether you call that the singularity or something else. And you do see this every day. I do kind of track all of these communities, or let's say the biohacking ones, which I have a lot of not negative stuff to say on previous podcasts, but I'm like facetious about it. And I think generally though, it's quite positive and empowering to see people taking their health and well-being in their own hands and have this like renewed awareness and interest in it, especially on a level of the scientific level. And not to say we're not all scientists, and I think it's important to have educated people and gatekeepers for these reasons, but people are going to do it either way. So I think those with the knowledge and those with the solutions do need to kind of partner with the large masses of people that are going to figure this out so that they're, not harming themselves as well.
What do you think about the war on drugs, Sam?
Should I tell you? What do you think?
I think if drugs weren't illegal, there would be no reason to sell them. I mean, I think everyone would be able to have their own. Obviously, this is a touchy point because I know that it gets into the greater cosm of society. And, should you make a drug like fentanyl, for example? Fentanyl is a huge, huge issue in the US right now. It really is a problem. And, it comes down to the judgment of an individual a lot of times. And if you make a drug illegal, you create a market for it. If you make a drug legal, you take a chance on society making the right choice. And then it comes down to, did you provide society, the individual, the family, the child with enough education? And then what are some societal issues that might cause someone to use that drug? I think it's a very complex thing. I do think the war on drugs is largely caused because drugs are illegal. If they weren't illegal, there'd be no market. But I do think that it's a much more complicated issue, and I don't know if there's a right answer to it.
I think with any economy, it's like two sides of the same coin, the light side and the dark side. I think they kind of need each other to coexist in some sort of weird way. Right? What is illegal and what is legal in terms of their variations of those drugs that are legal, right? If we're talking about cocaine, Adderall, not the same thing, but there are two choices there, and there's one that is considered the funnel that most children are being put into in school. A lot, I mean, not most, but again, I don't have data of this offhand of like what would be the trends of children being prescribed stimulants for ADD and ADHD at a young age, when in reality, maybe the school system is the problem. Maybe if we have personalized learning or decentralized learning or homeschooling to people to support that, or schooling that is outside and connected to nature or project-based, we now get rid of that. Not get rid of it, but we would probably see the prevalence of that need for that diagnosis to go down, because that would just be a simple sort of facet of human nature, as opposed to seen as something that's a deficit that doesn't fit into that setting. And then, of course, you have the illicit version of that, where it's people perhaps self-medicating for similar things, like a need for confidence, a need for focus, through, other, again, illicit things. So again, I think it's like kind of both systems, as they are designed right now, need each other to exist. What I'm suggesting, and what it sounds like you're suggesting, is that if society really were to evolve and address the underlying issues, it would probably impact both systems. The one that we're talking about that's illicit narcotics, and the one that we're talking about that's pharmaceuticals. So we need to address both. We need also the pharmaceutical companies. I'm saying here, like, not saying get rid of the war on drugs, legalize everything, because we have to fix the underlying societal level issues. But the pharmaceutical companies also need to be part of this conversation, understanding that if they get on board to fix these issues, they're going to need different lines of business. And that's right now something that I can't imagine would be a very pleasant conversation for anyone, because I think we're all still, again, every industry I talk to is still sort of holding on to this fact that, like, let's just keep things running on this old broken machine a little bit longer. But yeah, the damage that's caused from the war on drugs or illicit economies, it's massive. It's fueling more things than just simply drugs or cartels. It's really kind of impacting things at a scale of state actors and terrorism and like global issues that would be lovely if we could start to fix. But again, these are more macro issues in society. I mean, the education system alone is a starting point.
Absolutely. We have a lot of comments from Juan Carlos here.
I see, yeah.
Here, I can pull them up one by one. What was the last one?
Yeah, the Milton Friedman one.
Society needs to understand what freedom really means. Agreed.
I think it's some
wish
very
we could
passionate.
wish we could all live in a libertarian society. I just don't think people all think the same. Milton Friedman already pointed out that more than 5 decades ago, if we had taxed drugs heavily and used that money to educate and treat, we would be in a much better state. Maybe. I mean, what is a case study there? You could look to Colorado or even Portugal. I think Portugal as a country has been quite, right? Is everything a free-for-all there? I don't know. I don't want to speculate.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm sorry. But I don't think there are really any case studies where this has, there are examples
we could look at the marijuana industry in the U.S. Colorado being a really good example, one of the first states to really be pro marijuana and to legalize it to a large degree before that started to sweep through the US, was a really good use case in general, is how a state could handle that and tax the drug, which generated a lot of cash, a lot of income for a lot of businesses that wanted to get into that line. But it's something that was really popular already, and it's not something arguably that's, detrimental to you to have. It in a lot of ways it really is recreational. But like he's saying about, money going towards things like education, I think that's a big part of it. It's not that, a drug like marijuana has to be illegal, and it's not that it's going to like destroy you, but like any drug, like anything, if you abuse it, it definitely will have negative effects on you. You don't want to smoke marijuana and drive for obvious reasons. You don't want to be high and be in certain situations. You don't want to take something that you don't know how might affect your mind. Like certain strains of marijuana are far more impactful than other strains, and most people don't realize that. I barely understand and can scratch the surface of all these different strains of marijuana and how they impact you, and sativas and indicas. Like, I'm not really into that because I don't really consume it. But it's intricate. It's a whole culture that people don't fully understand. So there's an educational aspect that goes into that. Like, why are you taking it? What does it really do to you? How should you be using this stuff? It's the same thing with alcohol. Alcohol is legal, and alcohol can have a very bad effect on the body, and people choose to make terrible decisions with alcohol too. But alcohol probably has more long-term negative side effects than marijuana does on the body. Yet you can drink it anytime you want. You can go pick it up. It's not a problem, but a lot of people abuse it. They get behind the wheel and they die or kill somebody, or they do something stupid and they get a misdemeanor or a criminal charge, or there's domestic abuse involved. Like, there's tons and tons of issues around alcohol, yet it's legal. And there's some education around alcohol, but they don't push it enough, I think, and they should. So again, there's one stigma towards a drug, there's, a stigma towards another that maybe should, be equated in the same category, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and when you bring up alcohol, that's happening on the cultural or sociocultural levels. In Gen Z, definitely seeing trends away from alcohol or even marijuana, right? It kind of things centered around health and wellness, and the trends in the food and beverage industries, but even actually an example of the big alcohol companies or tobacco companies were onto that, seeing those trends and starting to move into a direction of probiotic sodas. We were talking about kombucha earlier, but actually starting to produce non-alcoholic beverages or things that might be nootropic, right? Focused more on well-being or at least positioned that way, right? It's still considered, we could say, a drug, right? It's something where you're having a fizzy drink that tastes like strawberries and has some chemicals in it that are going to make you...
Caffeine's a drug.
Yeah, right. But also these two, like here's L-theanine or something, like a calming beverage, and branding those. So again, it's just kind of a new group, a new desire, a new trend, maybe healthier chemicals than, let's say, drinking a bunch of beer or smoking weed. But it's I agree with you in the sense of addressing everything. I wouldn't say equally, right? Because we do have these schedules and classes of drugs. Maybe it's something to reconsider there, that an education of understanding that all of these things alter you in some way, and you're making choices about that with your body. The question is, at what age, not of when can you give consent, but even like our brains are not fully formed to a certain point, and we're already starting to augment and do things to them. And there are classes of drugs, you mentioned fentanyl, that can kill you right away. One little accidental, and you might not even know, right? And it's, I think, largely a result of, again, the illegality in the illicit drug trade of this ending up in other things like cocaine or party drugs or things that, these teenagers or college age students might accidentally get into. We're not talking about like people who are getting kind of pulled into an addiction loop for other reasons that are actively seeking out fentanyl, but those who also, because of the illicit narcotics trade, where this is ending up in pretty much anything. I couldn't imagine, not like I was like a crazy youth myself, but I couldn't imagine being one now and with that fear of like, you really can't mess with anything. Like what's going to happen? You're take a puff of a joint and it's laced with fentanyl and you die. That would be more unlikely than some other drugs, but has happened. So, yeah, I mean, the solutions there are
Source your flowers, roll your own joints.
don't take anything from strangers, and don't take a bag that someone gave you onto an airplane. Like,
Absolutely.
yeah, I never understood those questions. Like, did you receive anything from someone that you don't know? Like,
Yeah, someone just gave me a bag of weed.
someone gave me this thing. I'm just carrying it. This is one issue where like I have been like more traditionally with most things like libertarian minded, but then it's, as I evolve and think through it, if we don't have the structures in place in a society to do what you're saying is necessary, which is heal the society at the levels where the family units are solid and kids and people are growing up with a stable environment or education. And even in those circumstances, right? Everything could be perfect. The stuff is still around and people will make choices. And it's on them to make the choice. But then also if things are extremely addictive, like some drugs are, or you kind of, again, have a different circumstance, let's say with like fentanyl or the opioid epidemic. It's like people had real issues, like fractured back and, had excruciating pain and then kind of end up in that loop. So what are we doing to fix and support these examples? I don't know if I shared this with you before. I put it in my book. I fractured my back in high school playing ice hockey. And yeah.
Like fall on it, like backwards or?
No, some girl cross-checked me and I snapped and it was two compression fractures.
Did you get her back?
No, women are not supposed to check people in the first place, but they're violent. It was not a bad thing, right? But it's enough that I have like slipped discs or whatever. I don't know. It's pain. Let's call it that. Like many people have back pain and a bit of scoliosis. So in my 20s, it kept me up at night. Like I can't sleep. I toss and turn a lot. And I go to this doctor with the back x-rays and I wanted to get a prescription for sports chiropractor and acupuncture. And so I had read with my insurance if I could get some sort of like doctor's note that this would be covered. And so I go in asking for it and he writes me a prescription for muscle relaxers and OxyContin or maybe not OxyContin, but something like at that level. And patches, which might have been fentanyl patches, like crazy stuff. And I was like, I'm 25. At any age, but like what do you think I'm going to do? And so obviously I didn't do this, go down this path and kind of worked through pain in different ways. And fortunately, like holistic healthcare is available. It's not necessarily covered by insurance, but there are more and more providers that'll do the things that I need. But yeah, I saw recently, this is an example kind of going a bit on a tangent with Elon Musk announcing that the next use case for Neuralink would be back pain. And I was like thinking, I'm very creeped out by this because I think it's a Trojan horse, like a little bit like get the chip in majority population because everyone after a certain age has back pain. But when I think about it, right, if I put on my optimism lens, not my like skeptical, like habitual skeptic lens that think that this is just a way to get chips in the brain, I mean, that if we can come up with ways again to address some of these real issues, alleviate like real pain in a way that can be one and done, and it's not a surgical or chemical intervention, I think that truly could be remarkable, and especially in that crisis. Now, it doesn't solve the things of people who are already physically addicted, physiologically, where that is a very tough process to recover from. But it does hopefully prevent people from falling into the paths that lead them into some of these drugs, which often is some form of pain, right? I mean, there's also the mental anguish question as well, like the mental health challenges where people fall into all sorts of chemicals. So, that being said, I am optimistic, but it does require a lot of changes on every level of society.
It reminds me a lot of when I broke my shoulder. It's kind of similar to your experience with the back, probably not as severe, but I'm also kind of curious on your take too, because I think there's such a focus on allopathic medicine in Western society. I think it really neglects what people truly need in order to not have problems in the first place, but also to heal properly. And I've broken my shoulder, I've broken my foot, I've messed up every muscle in my body. And I swear I've been prescribed oxycodone and all these different things like for pain and given all these drugs and different things to do. And honestly, the only thing that's ever helped me is my woo-woo chiropractor that I had in high school and college. And there's so much more to the body in terms of things like healing. In allopathic medicine, it's like there's an issue, let's just prescribe the issue. Whereas in naturopathic medicine, it's let's assess and treat the body rather than the issue, because the issue is not necessarily located just in one place. If you treat the rest of the body is going to treat the issue itself. It's just a different philosophy of medicine. But it's worked better for me over time, generally, than allopathic medicine has. And I think that it's something that's worth studying more for a lot of these companies going forward, not to just create these miracle drugs, but to really understand how the body reacts to these things and finding ways to enhance the body so that it can do it itself. Because I truly believe that in a lot of cases, the body can correct itself and heal itself if it just knows how. And there's a lot of crazy use cases too. Not even use cases, but just phenomena, I guess, where people will get these like life debilitating issues, or they'll have disease of some kind that's like makes them terminally ill, or they'll get cancer or have some kind of problem, and they'll do something and their body will, cure it on its own. Or, there's all these miracle cases that pop up all the time. And it's, connected to mentality sometimes. Sometimes it's connected to your partner. I've seen a lot of people that have really strong bonds with their partner, and their partner, for some reason, helps them, get through some of those things. And when they lose that partner, sometimes they lose will as well, and then they get sick. Like there's a weird connection between love with a partner and how that affects your health emotionally. There's a spiritual aspect to it that has helped a lot of people as well. I think there's so much more to it that needs to be explored, that if you could couple that with groundbreaking advancements in medicine, in pharmaceuticals and drugs, would actually probably be more beneficial. Because I don't think the future is let's just take a pill and solve it. Let's change your DNA so that nothing ever happens again. I think you start tweaking with a lot of that stuff. We're playing with Pandora's box a little bit, because we can map our genome and know that something does something, but we also don't know what the rest of it does. And there's this black box of uncertainty with our DNA. where we can turn things off and turn things on, and who knows what that does to us 40 years later.
Skin turns purple.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of trial and error. I agree with you on the holistic, both measurable and immeasurable yet approaches, right? It's a full mind, body, spirit, energy. It's everything. And a lot of those topics have been relegated right to the side. And I think that's actually a problem why there's so much distrust in the pharmaceutical industry, because it's been for so long positioned as at odds, right? You've now just delineated as two different even forms of medicine, two different disciplines, two different qualifications, or many different, but really there's this like, they don't have to be at odds in many cultures throughout history, whether we're talking like traditional Chinese medicine or like Ayurveda coming out of India, which is more food based, but also full body, like kind of ancient system, or any of the systems, they tend to kind of combine. And what you're saying with like the back pain, for me, yes, chiropractic. I did Rolfing, which is kind of a movement of fascia in the body, like a very like the deepest deep tissue massage through a 10-part process you can imagine. Honestly, going to the gym and strengthening the posterior chain, my backside, my glutes, I can feel the difference whether, even I take a week off and I start to, the core, I get a little limp, and then like I can even see myself now, right? I start to kind of hunch over in a certain way because the rest of it is not holding itself. Otherwise, it's fine. Now, I could sit here and hunch in a certain way, be on a computer, never go to the gym, and be like, oh my God, I need to take all these pills because I'm in pain. Or
you're supposed to lift both sides, Sam.
I shouldn't lift things with the little curvature, but you can, they're like competing ideas on whether you can kind of balance by strengthening one side more. But, it's so minor too. And certainly like sitting on couches, hunching over and being on like devices and computers also is not helpful for most people in this culture. So again, I think if the companies, even on these very minor issues, they're not life-threatening, but they can become extremely disruptive for health and happiness and mobility, especially in later years, and maybe turn into needing medicine. Yeah, I would like to see more of those synergies. And again, this is not coming from some like woo-woo idealistic thing. I think people, the food system is another one.
It's amazing what can be solved with just the right diet too. And I'm not even just saying everyone has to eat a chicken Caesar salad, but I mean, sometimes you just make a small tweak to your diet. Like some people need, more protein in their diet. Some people need specific amino acids that they're not getting in their diet. Some people need, less diuretics and more water so they can have better retention. Some people need certain supplements so that they can retain certain things in the body. But it's pretty incredible when you really dial in your nutrition, and everyone's different in terms of what their bodies need, again, because we're all completely different genetic makeup. It can solve a lot of problems. And I've had a lot of issues with not being able to sleep and having like narcolepsy and stuff like that at points in time. And I had a lot of issues with it when college, and a lot of it was just diet, because I was like engorging like enormous amounts of carbs into my body because I was in sports and I was burning tremendous amounts of calories a day, and I had to, or else I'd shrink and shrivel up. But once I got out of sports and I went back to like a normal diet and I had a little bit more balance, like a lot of those issues just completely disappeared. And that can go for any kind of thing that you have that might be an ailment or disabling you. Your body needs to be in a good state of homeostasis with your diet, because that brain gut connection is a lot more powerful than people give it credit for. Um, it's like if the engine's not working, the computer's not going to process.
Yeah.
And if the computer can't process, it can't tell your body what to do. That includes, how to function, how to act, and how to heal, how to behave, um, how to do a lot of things. So again, diet is, I think, another thing people need to look into a lot more. You don't even need a lot of external stuff. It's just, you got to keep the engine tuned.
Yeah, I think that is probably, again, one of the areas I'm most excited about with personalization and AI. It was something some years ago, actually, I was doing work in supply chain industry for pretty much everything, every industry. But where I became passionate was really the idea of pulling in all this data, the source data, the ingredient data, one, to say, is it healthy or not, and create certifications, but two, to then pull that data and be able to like kind of cross-reference it with your genetic makeup and say like, this is good for you, this is not. Not good, but like aligned with your kind of best outcomes. That's another example of a place where, or an industry or a mindset where we have like a very top-down approach, or have historically, when you're saying, again, like develop this drug and then use it off, like, off label for pretty much everything. And it's trial and error. And like, this works for some people and this is going to completely mess up your life for other people. When we've had things like food pyramid, or even concepts like macros, which I, was like into that for a bit when I was more, I wouldn't say bodybuilding, but like fitness, like wanted to push myself in as far as I could go there. And, what's right for one person is maybe not what's right for the other. Some, as you said, some people might need more protein than others. Some might do better on a carnivore diet than like a vegetarian. Sure. It really depends. And I think having assistance, right? Not just having the data, but having ways to process that and figure that out from a combination of trial and error, but also recording it in some sort of way, or receiving guidance of what maybe to try. I think
I'm very excited
cool.
for AI agents, because what people will be able to do is customize an AI to their body type and composition, and it'll act like this like personal nutritionist, right? So that it will actually know what your body needs if you give it the right data and you actually train it properly, and it'll be able to tell you, like, you'll be able to say, I'm feeling really low on energy today. I feel a little lightheaded or cloudy and I don't feel motivated. And they'll be able to say, well, this is what you ate the last 5 days. Maybe you should consider replacing it with this and this today. And if you go to the grocery store 5 blocks down, you can get X, Y, and Z. And this is really good for your gut biome. And this is really good for your immune system. And I think people need that, because the food pyramid doesn't work. Again,
no,
it's
a
an
lie.
overgeneralization of what health and nutrition is. We really need to find ways to personalize these things and then customize plans for people when they want it, so that they can optimize their health. That's the only way to really do it. And not everyone can afford to go to a nutritionist, and the nutritionist doesn't know what you're actually doing. And most people probably lie to their nutritionist. No, I did not have a burger yesterday. There's a degree of sanctity and privacy with an AI agent. And I don't know. I'm very excited for that, because I think it'll actually do a lot of good for people.
I've been experimenting with that for fun, because it was the one thing I was excited about. And I never believed I would like kind of trust, my own, I kind of fine tune my own agent. So I trust that enough, but with medical data or things. And I'm not like, of course, I'm like a privacy nut. So within reason, but I did test with like blood work. Let's say I had some results. I was trying to make sense of everything. And then started to say, let's co-design, like, where do I maybe need supplementation, or where through foods, here's what like I eat generally, and what to add in, like, something super random. I'm trying to think of something random that I'd add in. I'm quite boring in my eating, but, Yeah, I mean, I think that's really impactful, even to have something to talk to think through it, and kind of fun to devise a plan. I realize that many people really don't have the time to think about these things, or as you mentioned, like the access to nutritionists who, even at the end of the day, would not be processing all of that data and information so quickly, because things do change too. People's bodies, right? Every day of that you wake up, it's your levels are kind of different, or so I don't know if I'd necessarily advocate for these where there are some directions where people could have like a continuous glucose monitor without diabetes, right? Just someone who's interested in understanding that data. Everyone has the right to do that. So if that's something you want to do it. I do believe that this information should still be owned by the user of that device, not the company that's created it, or at least it should be the user of that device's choice, whether they want to share that with other third parties or monetize it. But again, we're seeing more trends of people tracking all of this, or tracking hormones or menstrual cycle. I'm trying to think of all the more invasive stuff beyond just the biometrics with the watches. And you could imagine something like what you've described, where you have that agent and it's communicating with that data coming off of the watch, the glucose monitor, some other information, right?
There are a lot of projects, and I've talked to a lot of them, that are integrating different blockchain solutions and
Yeah.
ZK proofs.
Good.
So essentially, you can have these AI agents with this underlying blockchain infrastructure so that your data can be read, but only to a degree and to what you want it to be read for. So like, you could have your doctor take a look at it, or you could provide like permission to a pharmaceutical company or an agency or insurance company or something, without giving them the full information, but like verification of that information, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that you still have full anonymity if you want it, and protection and privacy. So that like not everyone's getting a copy of your genome or your blood results, or, that not everyone knows what's going on with you, but that they know that they can verify that those things exist. I think it's going to be very interesting for healthcare, because there's always this big stigma as well around privacy, around health data, and it's very picky. Some people care about it a lot, some people don't, but it can be very sensitive information. We don't necessarily want everyone to know what's going on with us. It's a very personal thing. And some things can be very, embarrassing for some people, or uncomfortable for others. And so I think that's going to be actually a very good collaboration of two technologies that are kind of coming up at the same time right now. I'm not so much worried about AI agents. I think that'll be solved. But I do think it's something that people should keep an eye out for, because data is the oil of the future. So you definitely want to have control of your data. That's something to always think about.
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent for data autonomy, but privacy, and was early in the zero knowledge cryptography space. I don't know if I ever shared that with you, but that was some of our core intellectual property of my company. Because you're dealing with global supply chains, so it's how do you reveal, confirm that you meet a certain criteria without revealing that data. So the example there is, again, like since we were talking about alcohol, the common example is like you have to be 21 to enter a bar, and there's the bouncer there with this zero knowledge cryptography app, right? And it's, is this person over the requirement or under do they meet it or not? So you're not revealing your age, you're just saying, do you meet it or not? And so with medical data, you could imagine that, is this treatment, does she have one of the listed potential genetic mutations that would cause a side effect? Yes or no? It doesn't tell you which mutation. I mean, you could probably design a system in a way where you would reverse engineer it and know some stuff. But that is like a baseline requirement for me at this point for pretty much any system of the future. Unless we're talking post-quantum, then there might need to be some sort of post-quantum version of this. But generally, I really just can't comprehend why anyone with a logical mind would not design things in this way unless they're, again, so deeply desiring to work based on an old idea, old system, which is, your data is mine and I'm going to sell it and monetize it for my own game. I think those days are over, or they should be, or they're close to. So there are, again, ways to do this in a more fair way, and I think people will still share the data or share more. I would gladly share that data. I just told you I inputted to an AI agent, like, blood work, here's the genetic part of the genome. Like, what the heck, right? Like, it's me. I'm kind of crazy. People will do it. They're going to willingly want to. They need to be protected in terms of what they're sharing and where that goes. But people could have fun with it too. I think there's nothing more empowering than understanding your own body and having data to support that, and tweaking things like food, which is such a core human thing, because we all do it and we all need it, and it's kind of a cornerstone of culture and society. And I think this could become like this new era of the hearth, even, of like, what is it that we're talking about centered around health, well-being, and food and cooking. And again, there are a lot of really exciting possibilities for advancements where, again, existing companies can get involved to still support the overall business model of medicines or drugs. I mean, essentially they're chemical companies. So really the question there is, what does the chemical trade look like in the future, and what is it used for, and how does that evolve? But
I hope they'd be optimistic of it, because the future really is heading towards this idea of tokenization of everything, including data. And it actually is very beneficial for them. In the same way it'd be beneficial to an advertiser to receive information. If you own your healthcare data and you own all the health data about yourself, you have the ability to sell it because you own it. And if you have the ability to sell it, you have the ability to sell something that is validated and true, and that's more official than an observation, to a healthcare provider or a pharmaceutical company. They may want it for a study, for a new drug or a new trial, or sell it to Harvard so they can do a review article on a new breakthrough that they're working on. It creates a more honest society, I think, and also a better economy, I think, around data than just scraping it and stealing it from everybody and then selling it behind everyone's back, and then everyone gets upset. Like, you get a better result from it, you save time, you make more money. The person providing data makes more money, the person receiving it or the company receiving it, is going to have a better threshold to get their product out without spending as much money. I think there's a lot of different benefits to owning data in the future, especially healthcare data, because it's already so valuable. So again, very excited for a lot of those things and a lot of those developments and technologies that kind of collide with each other. I'm going to have to probably wrap up here. I think it's probably a good place to wrap up the episode as well. We're going for a long time, huh? This one's almost 2 hours. I think we're getting a rhythm here, getting deep into some of these topics. I don't think we have a time limit. I think we just kind of wing it as we go now, which is kind of cool. But let us know what you guys think as well about drugs. Obviously, this is a very big topic with a lot of different nuances. Let us know your experiences with drugs. Let us know what you think about the future of them. If, the naturopathic side is better than the allopathic side, if there's a future for that, what you think about the pharmaceutical industry and how maybe that'll evolve in the future. Let us know your thoughts, any questions and comments you may have. Sam, any last closing thoughts on this as well?
No, I think we went on quite a journey of all the different types of drugs. This could be, again, like a week-long episode. I'm still kind of swirling on the ideas of what the future of, like, will people be abusing and economies around that, because it kind of feels more like science fiction. I think of Dune, right? Isn't there the spice trade Isn't that a whole thing?
I can never get over the whole sci-fi
Yeah.
fantasy of the spice, and it's in like everything. But
What does it
especially,
do?
I don't even fully understand, but it just it makes me laugh because I never read the books. I don't know much about like the whole story and everything, and I know that it's deep into science fiction. It's been around for a long time, but it's funny when I watch the movies today, and then he goes out in the desert and he like has this spice and his eyes turn blue and now he's like the Messiah, and I'm like, what's going on here? Like
That
it,
was yeah, that's where my head went with this. It was less about the existing kind of current status of pharmaceuticals and more like what is the future spice trade of space, and will we see like space cartels? I mean, I guess that's the premise. I again have not really been deep into reading that series. I probably should, but I did recall, for as long as there's human trade of anything, there's the trade and the illicit sides, and it seems that humans will we always have had like drugs or of some sort, and I'm sure we still will in the future.
and I'm sure we'll have space pirates too, space cartels, all that stuff will
All
exist
right,
one day.
yeah.
All right, this is a good place again to wrap up. Again, any comments, questions, final thoughts, definitely share it with us in the comment section. Give us a follow, subscribe, and we'll see you guys all in the next episode. Take care.